Okay. Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Exactly. I mean, never mind the question of like how you can discover a place where the inhabitants are watching you arrive from the shore. Yeah, they weren't wearing pants. Is that what somebody said? I like that. Evidence has surfaced and continually grown to indicate that many of these pre-Columbian explorers might have come from Africa. Get ready? There you go. Let it out of your system. Awesome. Africans had ships. In fact, they had four kinds of. They had unbelievable. They had a shipload of vessels. The Portuguese, like Captain Pereira, had heard that African traders were visiting Brazil in the mid-1400s. At least a dozen explorers, including Constantine Ravenous, reported seeing blacks upon reaching the New World. In fact, in 1513, Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa, when Balboa was there, he said he met members of a tribe of Ethiopians in Panama. And according to Balboa's log, these men came from a totally black village that was 2 days' journey away. And he figured that these blacks had come from Ethiopia at a much earlier date. Now, there are numerous pre-Columbian figurines with striking similarities to ancient African artwork, and they've been found in Central and South America. In southeastern Mexico, there are 18 rock statues of heads up to 11 feet tall that are facing the ocean looking east.
Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Joel Mugisha here. So who discovered the Americas? Well, Google actually says explorer Christopher Columbus discovered the Americas, but he's doubted to have settled foot in North America. Many schools teach us today that Christopher Columbus actually is the father and the explorer who discovered the New World. America, or the United States of America, celebrates Columbus Day every year on October 14th. But who discovered the America really? Today's video we're gonna see and we're gonna show you guys that Africa discovered the America before Christopher Columbus. First of all, how can you discover a place that was inhabited by people who actually could look at you on their shores as you come and claim to have discovered that place? There are so many claimants to this thing. First is the Vikings, who claim to have already been colonizing Iceland and Greenland over a millennium ago in the year 1950 CE, before Christopher Columbus ever sailed to the Americas. Also in the year 1999 CE, Leif Erikson is known to have left Norway on his way to actually Christianize Greenland. And as a result, he was blown off course and found himself in the New World, particularly modern-day Canada. History says that he settled there and established settlement before going back to Norway. Another claimant is the Irish. The Irish claim that St. Brendan, an Irish monk, sailed in the 6th century across the Americas in his traditional coracle and discovered the New World 5,000 kilometers away from Europe. The Welsh also claim that Mandog ab Owain sailed and landed in the year 1170. The Scottish claim that Henry Sinclair is known to have reached Westford, Massachusetts in the year 1398. Well, all these European claims dominate popular imaginations. However, they hide the fact that Africans and Africa was the first to discover the Americas before Christopher Columbus and the Europeans ever set foot in the Americas. Well, this narrative is known to have been vehemently disputed by famous and known historians and scholars. But anyways, guys, this is not a surprise because much of the African history has been wiped out from modern history by Europeans. In this video, guys, we're gonna expose the fact that Africa actually discovered the Americas by evidences provided by Professor Von Don Howell. In many of my comments, very many people, Black Americans, Jamaicans, people in the Bahamas and the Caribbeans, they actually claim to be descendants of the Moors. They claim not to have made it to the Americas through slavery. But is that really a claim, or is it the truth? Are Black people in the Americas native to the Americas? So guys, let's dive into today's video, and then we're gonna come back and talk about this, and I'm gonna give my commentary at the end of this video.
All right, Annetta, lock the doors, because what I'm about to say is going to upset some people right next here. Okay, Christopher Columbus did not discover America. Exactly. I mean, never mind the question of like how you can discover a place where the inhabitants are watching you arrive from the shore. Yeah, they weren't wearing pants. Is that what somebody said? I like that. So anyway, there were actually many other mariners before Columbus that discovered America as well. Decades earlier, even eons earlier, there were so many people that were coming across these islands and this continent. But it's only been in the last century that evidence has surfaced and continually grown to indicate that many of these pre-Columbian explorers might have come from Africa. So the first scientist to promote this possibility was Leo Wiener. Born in Russia, Wiener immigrated to the United States in the late 19th century on his way to British Honduras, where he planned to open a vegetarian commune. Well, when that turned out not to be the dream job he expected, he moved back to the United States and he became a professor at Harvard University, as one does. But in his time in Mesoamerica, he started noticing things. There are lots of things that led him to encounter certain discoveries that made him consider that possibly if the origins of American civilization might actually be in Africa. So he observed so many linguistic and botanical and other similarities that between 1920 and 1922, he published an extensive 3-volume piece called Africa and the Discovery of America. Now, unfortunately, this is the 1920s, so as yet, no serious archaeological evidence had been done or work had been done to support his botanical theories, because everyone was over raiding tombs in Egypt and things like that. Nod to Howard Carter. So he didn't have a whole lot of other stuff than the names to support him. However, he knew that other clues must exist. For example, he pointed out that Columbus himself was aware that African mariners had preceded him. In his diary of his second voyage, Columbus tells of how the natives of Hispaniola actually had given him gold-tipped metal spearheads that they said were brought by black-skinned people who had come in large boats from the south and southeast. Coincidence? I think not. No. So what's interesting about that, so upon returning to Spain, is that he actually took the spearheads and he sent them away and they had them assayed, and it turned out to be that these spearheads were covered in this metal this alloy that the inhabitants called guanin, and the metallurgists actually found out that this was an alloy of 32 parts. It was like 18 of gold, 6 of silver, 8 of copper, which, dun dun dun, matched the metal used in spearheads made in Western Africa for thousands of years, as carried by medieval African warriors, including the Mali and the Moors. The West Africans even called this metal guanine, the same name used by the natives of Hispaniola. But nothing more was said about that. Conspiracy. Well, probably because, in the interest of Spain, it was in their best interest that they didn't want to have any challenges to their discovery and the claims to the islands of the West Indies. Well, as the poem goes, or it should anyway, in 1493, Columbus stole all he could see. Yeah, so on his second voyage, which was 10 times larger than the first, Columbus went on a frantic but unsuccessful island hopping trip to find gold and spices. He carried along several natives from his newly discovered San Salvador, which the inhabitants called Guanahanvi. Another island that the natives pointed out was really large and was called Soameto. Soameto. Now, Columbus continued going around whimsically renaming every island he could find. But, Leo Wiener, being the curious person and the linguist that he was and the etymologist, he couldn't help noticing that the origin of these many place names and botanical names in Mesoamerica actually sounded distinctly like other languages in Africa, particularly Bantu and even Arabic. Wiener and numerous other botanists have also puzzled over the presence of certain plants that predated Columbus but originated in Africa. For example, the calabash bottle gourds. Now, this is a species originally from West Africa where they were well cultivated in America before Europeans arrived. Now, even long before they existed in Indonesia or Polynesia. So, in fact, the Pacific was the last place that bottle gourds actually reached and expanded to. Pardon my covfefe. Well, if it were not for transatlantic trade, pre-Columbian times, it would be very difficult to explain how certain plants, such as the yam, the sweet potato, domesticated cotton, peanuts, and tobacco, reached both West Africa and the Americas. The spread of the plantain is particularly noteworthy because it could not remain viable if it was carried in salt water. Well, in the 1640s, a Brazilian botanist named George Margrave. Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Speaking of botany, Ricola. Yeah, there we go. So thank you very much. So the Brazilian botanist George Margrave wrote that the establishment of a particular varieties of plantains in this region stands as a strong argument for ancient maritime contact between the Americas and Africa. That's bananas. B-A-B-A-N-A-S. That's right. Thank you. All right. Excuse me. All right, yeah. Okay. So, how do these plants and languages, that's going to be good for the video. All right, fix and pose. All right, use the cough drop. Okay, so how do these plants and languages and other cultural elements get to the Americas? Well, some believe. So what's that? Well, you're cheating. Well, some people believe that, over thousands of years, Africans migrated out of Africa and then over the Bering Strait, then down into South America, and things like that. Well, another explanation exists, and so get ready. There you go. Let it out of your system. Awesome. Africans had ships. In fact, they had four kinds of. They had unbelievable. They had a shipload of vessels, and they had away. The anchors away. So, in fact, they had four kinds of vessels, and Nubian pottery. This is an example of Nubian pottery with a painting on it that shows a long-hold pottery art. That shows either a long-hold boat or a papyrus raft or a hauled-out canoe. And then this other painting beside it is from, the first one was from 3000 BC, and this is a bird's-eye view of an oared riverboat in Chad. And it dates from 3500 BCE. Now, the Africans of Guinea also had dugout canoes hewn from these monumental trees on the coast there. In 1500, Just a few years after Columbus's voyage, the Portuguese captain Pacheco Pereira wrote, "In this country can be found the largest canoes made of a single trunk. Some are so large that they hold 80 men." Now, the West Africans were known to lash 2 dugout canoes together, side by side, and no one questions the seaworthiness of a similar type of Polynesian catamarans. Well, here's a 15th century Portuguese painting of sailing canoes on the Congo estuary. The Portuguese, like Captain Pereira, had heard that African traders were visiting Brazil in the mid-1400s. So to demonstrate that mariners from West Africa could have sailed to the Americas using papyrus vessels as early as 2000 BCE, Norwegian adventurer Thor Heyerdahl actually used ancient shipbuilding techniques in order to construct and sail the Ra 1 and the Ra 2 in 1969 and 70. And generally, some type of sailing vessel will average about 100 miles per day, even without sails. And in an ocean current, something like a raft or a reed boat can average about 60 miles a day. Now, Islamic historian Amir Hajib reported that voyages west from Mali were happening in the year 1311, just 150 years before Columbus. Now, when he asked the Mali emperor, shown here, incidentally, holding a globe of the world made of solid gold, asked him, well, tell me about this rumor about Atlantic travel. And he said that his predecessor had commissioned an expedition with 200 ships filled with men and a similar number with gold and water and enough provisions for 2 years. And he said, go out and find something. And if you don't come back, so you find something or you run out of food. And unfortunately, only one ship returned, and the captain told the emperor that we sailed for a very long time until we met what seemed like a river with a strong current flowing in the open sea. I was the last ship, and I turned where I was and did not enter the current. The others disappeared. I do not know what became of them. So, well, this story seems to describe the trade wind-driven equatorial current, or the Canary Current. Now, I apologize if anyone has any cats on their lap at the moment, but so we basically have two rivers, two circular rivers in the ocean here, and you can see it's very easy for Africans from the south and the Angola regions to come up towards the equator and going westwards, or from the western coast of Africa north of the equator to go eastwards along that same current. But you know, this Mercator projection doesn't really, in terms of cartography, boom Mercator, it really doesn't do it justice. So let me just, I did this little animation for you to show that they could have taken the Canary Current up and around, and then they go over they fall off the edge of the earth, and then they come back and they make landfall back again in Cape Verde. So it is definitely possible. So I definitely had to do that. Now, at least a dozen explorers, including Constantine Ravenous, reported seeing blacks upon reaching the New World. In fact, in 1513, Spanish explorer Vasco Núñez de Balboa, who you might know because people named a very popular dance after him. Anyway, so when Balboa was there, he said he met members of a tribe of Ethiopians in Panama. And according to Balboa's log, these men came from a totally black village that was 2 days' journey away. And he figured that these blacks had come from Ethiopia at a much earlier date. So there are also examples of physical evidence, including pre-Columbian African skeletons, which have been found throughout the Americas. Now, dating between 800 BCE and 300 CE, these murals are from the Temple of the Warriors at Chichen Itza. Now, they clearly feature, the color version is easier to see, but they clearly feature 3 races. And it's depicting black and Indian allies and a battle against white invaders. Now, because of their long blonde hair jewelry, a skin-hulled boat that we have here, right there, and also the fact that they're fighting naked, which was common for warriors from Ireland, they believe that these are Celtic warriors. And because this mural shows that blacks are clearly fighting on the side of the Mayans, that they must have been integrated into society much longer before this painting was done in order to form that form of alliance. Now, There are numerous pre-Columbian figurines with striking similarities to ancient African artwork, and they've been found in Central and South America. In southeastern Mexico, there are 18 rock statues of heads up to 11 feet tall that are facing the ocean, looking east. Now, archaeologists call them the Olmec colossal heads, after the people that carved them. And they were produced for 50 to 200 years and date from at least 900 BCE, when they were mysteriously buried for some reason. So now think about it. It took enormous effort to quarry these. The smallest one was 6 tons, so 6 to 50-ton blocks, to quarry them and carry them 75 miles away from the quarry, and then carve them and then erect them. These people that they modeled them after must have been important. Whoever they were, they must have been important to be remembered or obeyed or worshipped. Jose Meglia Serrano, the archaeologist who first uncovered them, he pointed out that facial features look amazingly like African blacks, and they all display distinctive headgear or protective helmets. Now, however, some people think that these are actually the facial figures of overweight babies. Yeah, I think they needed to wear helmets when they were babies, if they think that. So. Yeah. And then still others find it easier to believe that instead of Africans, those depicted or responsible for these sculptures, and as well as the Mesoamerican pyramids, were not African Americans, but dun dun dun. So why is it that so many people have never heard of this alternative of American discovery by the continent's nearest neighbors to the east? So, I mean, look, now the thing, exactly, whoa, where'd all the continents go? So, this is, look at how close this is. I mean, white people don't think that you could go, this is closer compared to more than twice the distance that Columbus sailed. This will win a drink for you in a bar game sometime. Which state is closest to Africa? Maine. Yeah, look. See there, you need a globe for this. Look at that. Versus yeah, geometry, science. There you go. So anyway, and so very few Americans know this. And why is this? So having examined textbooks throughout for years up until 2018, James W. Lowen says that although some books cite the alternative possibility that Vikings, Norse, or even Irish may have reached America first, not one textbook, old or new, mentions the West Africans. So whether or not you give any credence to this admittedly controversial Afrocentric theory, it's obvious that Columbus was not the first to discover America, but the last. So why did he make such an indelible mark on Western people's minds? Well, conquest may have a lot to do with it. Right, Eurocentrism. Unlike the mundanity of perhaps thousands of years of peaceful African transatlantic trade, the quest for gold and world domination makes a much better story. And, the good Queen Isabella was so proud of her fella that she immediately equipped Columbus with 17 ships, 1,500 men, 200 cannons, crossbows, cavalry, and even 20 attack dogs for a second voyage. And another, and another. The story of Columbus remains the most widely accepted version of American discovery, most likely because it was the most recent, the most well-armed, the most documented, and the most similar in appearance to the authors of American textbooks. And one other thing that should be pointed out here is that in the years after Columbus discovered America, in 400 years, 20 million Africans were stripped from the coast of Africa, half of them dying in transit for slavery, who knows how many fleeing inland. And at the same time, within 5 years of Columbus's arrival in the New World, 90% of the indigenous population had died from disease or murder, 90%. So the fact is, that leaves few people to have a written or memory or an oral history of the seafaring of their African discoverers. Historian Samuel D. Marble wrote, "As a subject for research, the possibility of African discovery of America has never been a tempting one for American historians. We choose our own history, or more accurately, we select those vistas of history that more or less kind of explain to have the promise of the greatest satisfaction for ourselves. And we have had little appetite to explore the possibility that our founding father was a black man." So nevertheless, there is considerable evidence to suggest that African mariners also participated in this great adventure, no less than Vikings, the Portuguese, Spaniards, Celts, Chinese, Polynesians, and Arabs, and others. So now I would like to raise a toast to all the discoverers of America before Columbus, wherever you may came from. May more of us discover you. Thank you.
So guys, you heard actually from the professor himself, Dan von Hoyel. These are the things that have been hidden from African history because, survival for the fittest, African or history of the world has been written by the survivors, the fittest, because everything that is actually relating to African civilization and modernization has been wiped away from modern history. But it should actually come to your point, because if you look at the map or the globe, the map of the world, Africa is the closest to the Americas, particularly the South Americas. And as we have seen in the video, there is so many sailing currents that could even actually have helped African ships to sail and make it to the Americas before Christopher Columbus and any other European. Columbus himself in his book actually he acknowledges the fact that African mariners had actually preceded him in discovering the Americas. He says he had found, African-looking people in the South Americas. These people with dark skin and slender hair, slender or softer hair in the Americas, guys. So these were some of the evidences. And in his book, as we have seen in the video, guys, the Native Americans actually went ahead and gave him spears that were forged in West Africa. And to make sure of this, Columbus took them back to Spain and they were examined. And during the examination, Spain found that these metal spearheads were actually covered with alloys that matched exactly spearheads and metals that were forged in West Africa, particularly by the Mali Empire and the Moors. And these spearheads were called by the Malians or the West African empires the guanin, and the native people of South America actually called these spearheads the same name that the West African called it. It was called the guanin. But these are the things that have been hidden from history. I've heard the Jamaicans say that they are Moors, they are native to the land of the Jamaica. I've heard so many people, Black Americans in America, say that they did not come to America as slaves. They have been in the Americas before the Europeans came and enslaved them. So this is actually particularly true if you read and search up the history of the black people that has been wiped from modern history. Black people actually, as we have seen so many times on this channel, were the forefathers of modern civilization. From civilizations like Kemet, where it's known as modern day Egypt, civilizations like the Kush Empire, the Mali Empire, the Benin Kingdom, there's so many civilizations that were going on in Africa, and Africans were traders, they were warriors, and there is so much that we have seen in this video, so many evidences that actually do show that Africans and melanated people colonized the world before Columbus and the Europeans. Guys, look at the world. Look at a place like Australia before the British people went there and colonized Australia. Australians' native people are black people. They are melanated people. They look like Africans. All over the Southeast Asia, in places like the Philippines, we find people who are melanated and look like Africans. Look at India. We find places in India with people who are melanated and look like Africans. Now, why would a continent which is so close to Africa as South America, very close to Africa than Australia is, very close to Africa than India or Southeast Asia is, would be an exception? Africa colonized the Americas. Africa discovered, if we can use that term, the Americas before Columbus ever did. And guys, you've seen evidences in this video where Professor has shown that Africans had the technology of building ships back then before the Europeans. You know, we had ships. We were actually doing fine. Very many of these things have been burnt down by the colonizers. Very many of the empire of the Mali Empire, or the Benin Empire, which is the Benin Wall, one of the longest wall, actually greater and bigger than the Great Wall of China, but it was burned down and destroyed by the British colonizers in order to actually hide these things from modern history. Anything that depict Africans of having intellect, anything that depict Africans of being the teachers of the Europeans of how to do things has been burned down and actually hidden from modern history, guys. So many people in the Americas, they could have brought a couple of black people who are enslaved to the Americas, but not all the black people in the Americas were slaves. I've seen that many people in my comment section telling me we were native to the Americas before. We were never enslaved. We are descendants of the Moors in West Africa. Black people had the technology to actually sail and colonize the Americas. They are native to the Americas. And the difference between black people sailors and the European sailors is that we, the African, never sailed with actually the ambition of violence as the Europeans did. When the Europeans sailed to any kind of continent, be it Africa or the Americas, they sailed with violence and committing genocide. On the other hand, the Africans, they sailed for trade, they sailed for cohabitation, they sailed for spirituality, things like teaching people of spirituality. Africans, we are so great. We had so many empires, and there are evidences of many empires in Africa, like the Kingdom of Kush, that actually went along and settled along the Nile River. We had the Mali Empire, a great, powerful Western empire that ruled the world from the 13th to the 14th century. We had kingdoms like the Kingdom of Benin, where you find so many sculptures and statues in the British Museum and in the New York Museum of the Benin Empire. We had the Songhai Empire, which was located in the Sahel region today. These are the things that African schools should be teaching, actually, African kids. But it's a sad story because the colonial master made sure that after giving African the so-called, fake independence, he wiped these things from modern history. He made sure that the descendants of the African people would never know the truth about themselves. And that is why many Africans and melanated people all across the world, they sound like lost people. They look like lost people. We are lost in this modern civilization because our history has been hidden. Our history has been wiped out from modern history. Everything that the Caucasian man, everything that the white man knows, he learned it from Africa, from civilization like the Egyptian civilization. These people used to come from the Roman Empire to universities in Egypt to come and learn about modern medicine, to come and learn about astronomy, to come and learn about mathematics, to come and learn about a lot of things, guys. So guys, we see that Africa today is teaching the history of the oppressor instead of teaching its own history to its people. And sadly enough, it's because of corrupt, leaders that are left in our countries by puppet masters who are still puppets of the masters, and they are only concerned about enriching their pockets. And most of them are actually protected by the puppet master so that he can continue to exploit the continent of Africa and its people, and make sure that the African people never rise beyond their masters and never rise beyond knowing the truth of what they were in the recent past. Guys, we've seen evidences like the Olmec statue heads that were discovered in the Americas, particularly in Mexico, guys. These statues were gigantic with African features like broad noses, and they wore helmets. But these people who fought so much to hide anything, considering that the African people preceded Columbus and the Europeans to discover the America, they built and dug up quarries. Can you believe the audacity and the courage of someone to dig up quarries to hide and bury gigantic stone heads that were discovered in Mexico in order to hide this from history and from future generation that the African man was actually in the Americas before the Europeans. This was done by someone who had the courage and the ambition to hide the truth and the fact that black people discovered the Americas. They went ahead after discovering these Olmec statue heads to say that these were depictions of overweight, in other words, fat babies. How could fat babies wear helmets? Because these Olmec statues wore helmets. Others say that these cannot be Africans, they are statues of aliens. They call them aliens, but not anything particularly to do with Africans. These people, they cannot agree to the fact that Africa, in fact, they know, in deep down, they know that Africa was in the Americas. Africa had the technology back then, but they are hiding the fact that Africans were greater in those medieval ages than they ever were. I actually think that today's curriculum in Africa should be changed to teach African mythology and African stories, because these are the stories that we need to know, because these are the stories that change your mentality. Many people are still enslaved in their mentality. Many people in Africa still think that they cannot do. Africans are not able of creating and inventing things, yet our ancestors had great empires. They were sailing across the world in the Americas, in Australia, in Southeast Asia, trading peacefully with people. We never sailed across the world to dominate and exterminate. We sailed across the world for peace. We sailed across the world to exchange cultural interest, spirituality, and trade commodities. Well, they say Columbus was the first to discover the Americas, but that is not true. Africa was the first to discover the Americas. If we might say anything, Columbus was the last to discover the Americas, and he was the first to bring genocide to the Americas. Well, it's been a great time having you on this show, guys. Thank you very much for watching this far. It's been your host, Joel Mugisha. If you're not subscribed, kindly subscribe. You know, my YouTube studio still shows me that many of you are viewing these videos by not subscribing. So please subscribe, like the video, and drop me a comment. What do you think of this video and this story and this narrative that Africa actually was in the Americas before Columbus? Thank you very much for watching. And as always, guys, see you on the next episode.